Welcome to episode 53 of Cyclops is Waiting For Me, an X-Men the Animated Series weekly recap podcast. I'm Rod. Welcome to the new year, 2023. Is this February now, the time you're listening to this? I don't know.
I love how you ask questions that there's no way I know off the top of my head, Rod.
No, I'm just asking the listener. Because I know that everybody talks back to their podcast.
And I'm JC. I had a bit and Rod ruined it. Cyclops is Waiting For Me is our weekly podcast series where we're going back and watching every single episode of the original 1992 X-Men the Animated Series in their original intended script order, building up to the release of X-Men 97, which is coming to Disney Plus later this year.
Excited. Also a little apprehensive, but excited.
I'm excited. I have enough faith in Disney Plus right now in the stuff that they've been doing that until they prove me wrong, I'm excited.
That's true. Even as far as like the Marvel TV shows, and I know this is a little bit different because it's not an MCU thing, even the worst of them, I've still had fun.
The only thing I didn't really get into was, I mean, obviously I have my thoughts about Moon Knight, but the only thing from like an animation perspective, I really just never got into that Groot series of minis episodes.
And that's kind of that gray area, right? Where it's not really like part of it, but it is.
But even if it's not, it still just wasn't. I didn't dig it, unfortunately.
Yeah. It was like, you could tell it was kind of angled for kids.
Speaking of, we are not affiliated with or sponsored by Disney or Disney Plus in any way. I'll take that one for you.
So some quick reminders. We're a recap show about a series that started now over 30 years ago. There will be spoilers. If you don't want to spoil it for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, and come back. We'll do our best to avoid mentioning anything about future episodes we haven't covered yet.
Don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok. Shout out to the TikTok people. I'm still not on TikTok. Twitter and Facebook. And of course, make sure to follow us on all of your favorite podcast services if for some reason you found this on YouTube or Facebook.
There is at least one or two people I've been seeing. I've been trying to keep up on commenting. Sorry if I haven't. That found us on YouTube, which is really cool.
I've seen those.
It's just not expected to see people discovering podcasts on YouTube, especially without like video.
Yeah, I mean, also shout out to the guy who randomly shot me a message saying they want to help us for SEO on our podcast on Instagram. That was fun.
Yeah, because nobody knows that's literally John's job in real life.
Understanding how YouTube works is definitely a big part of my job.
I got glimpses of the back and forth that you had. You sent me a couple and I saw glimpses of...
Oh, I threw the entire thing on our story. And then unfortunately his account got deleted. And I checked from my personal account too. It's not like he just blocked us. Yeah. He just got full-fledged deleted for being spam.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Either that or he just like gave up. He's like, time to start another account.
And I did not report him as spam because I was having fun. Because I asked him if he liked Logan or Cyclops better, and then he said goodbye, and I said, oh, you must be a Mojo fan.
Oh, that's hilarious. It's fun. So for extra content, follow us on all the socials.
Yeah, honestly, if you want the dumbest of our dumb shit, Instagram is the way to go. Finally, we record these episodes in batches, so if we're reacting to stuff that happened a couple weeks ago in real time, like me bothering a spam person, that's why.
So and I remember from last episode with the not news but like current stuff or whatever that
I've been anxiously waiting 35 minutes for this.
So it's not news. It's still kind of hearsay, but interesting theory at the very worst or least. So I guess if you haven't seen Eternals by now, you have. If you wanted to see, you would have. Because if you didn't, then you didn't. Because not a lot of people liked it. But there's a going theory that the celestial that's left in the ocean may become Genosha and might be mined for adamantium.
No, I'm going with the hardcorest of hardcore no's on that one. That's one of the worst theories.
Or at the very least, the celestial will be mined for adamantium, and that's how we discover it on this planet. I don't know where it actually originated from, if that was like an actual leak, people just talking about it, but the timing kind of makes sense because She-Hulk had the reference of Wolverine and the celestial in the ocean, the same bit, but also like the whole vibranium thing coming from outer space is suspected to be a celestial thing. So any of the metals coming from like a celestial body, like a literal body.
That one I don't have a problem with conceptually. That becoming Genosha is fucking stupid. So I hate whoever wrote that.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, can we just talk about, so when we created the Instagram account, we followed a bunch of stuff related to comic book adjacent stuff. Mm-hmm. And I've actually had to unfollow a few accounts because they do the sources tell us, and then it is blind guessing rumors. Mm-hmm. So Rob, by the time this episode comes out, I want there to be, similar to how you did the Rogue quote post, I want there to be one where it's based on our sources, asterisk, there are no actual sources. And then it's just the dumbest theory ever. And it's like, this is what you sound like when you post shit like this. Yeah. I hate that kind of shit.
Yeah,
because it's literally just throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping it sticks.
It's basically is it we got this covered. It's like the Godfather of a lot of those. Where the only reason I brought this one up is because I've seen various people talk about it.
I don't disagree with the metal theory. The Genosha thing is fucking stupid.
So I at the very least, if it's not Genosha, it's an island, which would be the only way to make sense that this thing in the middle of the ocean has been ignored and hidden from public. Thing is, if they just turn it into an island.
But I don't think it has been ignored. It just hasn't been addressed in the glimpses of the MCU we've seen.
Well, so I think the stuff I've seen talked about has been like it's going to be hidden from like public for the general public in the MCU, but the government's going to take care of it by like turning into. I don't know how they're going to mask a hand or whatever, but like. I don't know. It makes sense though, because the point that a lot of other people that I see like talk about this made is that like dead celestials, people inhabit them in other places in the MCU, like nowhere.
And then in the Avengers comic, currently there is the first dead celestial is the Avengers base in Antarctica.
Okay, yeah. So it, at the very least, maybe come like an island base or something, or I don't know. Who knows? Maybe that's where the X-Men. That would not work because they need to be in New York.
You can't force the combination of the X-Men and the Celestial together.
Right.
Because it's already so tied to the Eternals.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of lies.
Now onto the show. Today we're going to be talking about Season 4, Episode 16, titled Weapon X, Lies, and Videotape. It aired June 11th, 1995. You didn't hear that incorrectly. That was before the last episode.
By a significant time frame.
And currently sits at an 8.0 star rating on IMDb. Also, our guest today was supposed to be Shawnee from Romance at a Glance podcast, but we wish her well at recovery. She's very sick today.
I would hope by the time that this actually airs, she is no longer sick, or there's a much bigger issue she's dealing with.
Yeah. And what's funny is that if you heard us in the previous episodes, the only reason she was going to be on this one was because the title vaguely resembled something of a like smutty romance thing.
Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Yeah. Funny, it kind of did. Although it would have been much better to have her on the previous like 4 episodes where there were secret babies in literally every episode.
She would have done well on one of the Nightcrawler episodes with secret or Bloodlines. Bloodlines would have been the perfect one for her.
Bloodlines, even Family Ties, or the Proteus thing. They were all secret baby things. So one of the things I do know about their podcast,
secret baby things,
is their one of their merch things is a sticker that said secret babies, because I guess that's a trope in romance novels, and it's their best selling merch is a secret baby sticker. So I was like, oh, why weren't you on one of the 4 secret baby episodes? That's also our fault.
I was gonna say, no, don't. This is not an our scenario. This is a you scenario. Because I say, if there's a good guest, let me know, and they could be on. You explained all this to me after those episodes.
Yeah, we also didn't think there'd be like enough of a crossover, but Shawnee also watched the X-Men. She's my age and stuff. But also, what's funny, she texted me when she was like 3 minutes into the episode, and she was like, what did I miss? And I was like, I haven't watched it yet. Probably not much, because we're in the area now where all the episodes were out of order.
Yeah, so just for context, in case for some reason you have watched them in a different order and you just tuned in on this one, the previous episode has moments that are flashbacks from this episode because of something with the airing order that affected the scripts, is what our hypothesis is. Maybe let's remember when we talk to the Leewalds the next time to ask about this specifically.
Yes.
Because they're very nice to us and talk to us about stuff. We like Eric and Julia.
And so if I said this in the last episode, but in case you didn't hear it, if you're a purist and you want to watch the script order, watch it in the order we're doing this podcast. If you're watching casually with maybe like a kid or a family member or friend or something that hasn't seen the episodes, swap this one and the one before it.
Definitely hope you're only watching the show with the kid and not listening to this podcast with the kid.
Anyway, this episode opens up with Sabretooth and Logan fighting in a cabin. Silver Fox is hurt and crawling on the ground.
So I just want to point out really quick, the version of Sabretooth we see is different than the most recent version of Sabretooth we've seen too. Because when you see Graydon Creed getting dropped at his dad's ranch, he had white pupils and the mullet going.
Yeah.
This was, you saw his eyes and he had hair down. It was still a mullet, but it wasn't like the poofy mullet on the bottom.
Yeah, it was almost a bob or something.
So it was interesting because it's another design aesthetic for Sabretooth.
I think while we asked the Leewalds about this script order, I also want to ask about Sabretooth's various iterations, because another time in this episode, a couple times, the appearance is kind of inexplicable.
I have thoughts for that one, though. Okay. Let's get to that.
So this scene, if you're watching it in the order we watched it in, did happen in the last episode. It was flashback too. And speaking of when this scene happens, it reveals that Wolverine's actually having like nightmares in the med ward of the mansion.
Right.
Pretty much the entire X-Men team is around him. He's having the type of like night terror, kind of like nightmares, flashbacks.
But just to be clear, we also don't really have context as to what's going on, because you don't really even know from the last episode who she is. Like he hasn't even named her yet at this point. So we actually don't know who this woman is unless you are a comic book reader, etc.
Mm-hmm. I think I only knew because I think somebody screamed it and I saw it in the captions or whatever. So it wasn't like a forefront.
I think it's just Fox though. Like
he does say Fox. Okay.
Yeah.
And Professor Xavier's trying to kind of like do his mind probing therapy thing that he usually does when he helps out some of the X-Men, but there's like a feedback loop and he gets physically thrown back.
Yeah, he has a full-fledged like psychic feedback. This is after Jean has referenced that the nightmares and delusions are getting worse. So it's not just the fact that he's having nightmares, it's like actually affecting him in the real world now too.
And this scene is one of the reasons that I think that this was squarely supposed to come before the Lotus and the Steel episode.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't make sense for him, story-wise, to come to peace at the end of leaving Japan and then just be re-traumatized worse than before, you know?
So, yes, 100%. But also, and this is where we've talked about, they dealt with animation issues because of Saban being cheap with stuff. This was actually air date order. The first episode where Jean is back on the team after the Dark Phoenix, and it's just kind of not addressed at all.
Yeah, and even without that, we haven't seen her in a hot minute in like a prominent way.
Yeah.
Either, so she's just kind of back in the fire, you know.
Yep.
Wolverine wakes up, but he's still having like the nightmare, so he's hallucinating at this point, and he does what he does best. He freaks out and he runs out of the
Not only does he run out, he pops his claws. Mm-hmm. He sees Scott, who yells, but Wolverine sees Sabretooth.
Yeah.
And then Jean thankfully shields Scott because otherwise, our namesake would be dead. Beast attempts to restrain him, fails, and then Wolverine pops out.
Mm-hmm. And so Beast says he's just going to go get him. And arguably, he probably is the only one that really could.
I think he's the only one who's fit in the manner to catch Wolverine of that group.
Because he's physically like running after him. So he chases him outside. He doesn't see him for a second, but then Wolverine driving a Jeep almost runs over Beast. So he's still like in berserker mode. It cuts over to Jean rifling through Wolverine's nightstand.
Yes.
And finds a catalog of women that Wolverine has had relationships with, which sounds very evasive.
So we see another version of the infamous picture. Because it's not the same one that you have an autographed version of.
Yeah, the one that's cut in half.
It's cut in half, but it's also
different Jean.
It's a different outfit on Jean. Like her outfit is different than the one that we have the print for. Then it goes to what I'm assuming is younger Jean.
Oh, was that who that was? Okay.
Yeah, I think that was younger Jean, then Yuriko, and then you see Wolverine with Silver Fox. Mm-hmm. So,
and then we couldn't figure out if it was clear or not, but Jean makes a point to say like this arrived in the mail like a few days ago, and we don't know if it's just the Silver Fox photo or all of them. It would make sense if it was just the Silver Fox one.
Right. So interestingly enough, and we got the original version for Disney Plus, but the re-airing versions of this eliminated the other images. It was only the Silver Fox one when it was re-aired.
That would be a cleaner storyline. Because the other women are just kind of insulting, not the women themselves, but like the story, like just being like
that was a choice of words, right?
It's just like it's like here, Wolverine. Here's all the people you've traumatized in your life,
right?
Like that have tried to be close to you,
right? But so we see in big numbers on the back of the image when Jean is talking to Beast, 53 degrees and 120 degrees. Mm-hmm. And unlike the previous episode where they put longitude and latitude that was like just completely off in where
was
it actually
like one number or something.
No, it was two numbers, but it was like completely off of. It was like the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or something like that. This actually was in southern Canada on the west coast.
Yeah, but it was like kind of generic, right? It was like dead center or something.
It's like and John, remember to put this on our Instagram for that week. It is literally in the middle of the city of Vancouver.
Yeah, so somebody probably just Googled like Canada coordinates.
Yeah. Yes, they Googled in 1990. Oh, yeah. Wait, 95.
Anyway.
Canada.
Yeah, so they're in southern Canada, which was an interesting way to phrase it because, like, when I think of Canada, I don't think of north and south. I think, like, east and west.
I have friends from Canada, and I've heard them say southern Canada.
They say southern? Okay.
Some of them.
Okay. It must be a cultural thing because I guess you could argue the same thing about the United States. Is like it's more wide than it is tall, but like there's clearly a Southern culture and like a Northern culture. So I don't know. It was just weird to me because I was like, Southern could be like a lot of.
That's a lot of land. Yeah, that's literally the entire border.
So Wolverine arrives in quote unquote Southern Canada, which I guess we now know is like the middle of the city in Vancouver.
Yeah.
But in the show, it's in the middle of like nowhere.
Yeah, in the middle of a forest.
And he sees that it's the Weapon X facility. I don't know if we know that yet specifically, but I remember it just from...
It looked familiar from when we've had the past Logan flashbacks of him breaking out of the facility. I think that was pretty established.
So I guess he didn't remember that specific location because he saw it. He's like, of course. And
well, he was also wandering through Canada after, so it's not like he... has, and we're going to go into it way deeper in the episode, but he doesn't have like specific memories of that location and going back there on the regular, you know?
Yeah. And so he goes inside to explore, and one of the first things he sees is like that tube that he broke out of when he got the adamantium put into his...
Yep, the classic adamantium tube.
Mm-hmm. And so that triggers a flashback. He has a flashback of the scene that most of us know, if you're vaguely familiar with X-Men and Wolverine's origin story, of him getting the adamantium and breaking
It's not as overdone as Batman watching his parents get killed. Yeah. But it's close. It's probably like the Batman scene, Uncle Ben getting shot, Wolverine adamantium.
Especially in the X-Men movies.
They love it in the movies.
Showing that so much to the point where I think some of them kind of conflict with each other a little bit, don't they?
I mean, the X-Men movies as a whole conflict with. Yeah, but yeah, I think they just wanted excuses to show Hugh Jackman coming out of the water with his shirt off.
Yeah, which is fair. If I had worked out like that, I'd want as many shots.
Yeah, it's contractually obligated to have it in there.
Yeah. And so Beast shows up right about then, but Wolverine is still in his flashback, which is an interesting way to depict it because usually, this is a trope with like Homer Simpson and The Simpsons and stuff. When you see flashbacks or like daydreams and stuff, you never see what the person's doing.
Yeah, they're usually just in a daze.
Yeah. So Wolverine's actually going through like the motions.
Right.
And so since Beast happens to be there, like Wolverine sees Beast as whoever is the enemy in his hallucination and flashback. And he almost kills Beast in the fight.
He shocks himself, which I love because he basically gave himself like electroshock therapy to knock him back into consciousness.
Yeah, he's like stabs a computer. Which lucky for Beast. Maybe Beast did that on purpose. I don't know.
No, Beast did not. Beast got lucky.
So he comes to his senses and they see a door that's still like locked shut.
Well, Beast says, he's there to take Wolverine home. Wolverine's basically like, I know this place. It keeps bringing him back and something's drawing him back here. And he also says a phrase, which, we've talked about this before. Rod and I will hit all the main points beforehand, but we don't say certain thoughts because we want the reaction in real time. He actually says, I got my bones here.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously there is the I got my adamantium bones, but something I learned from, of all shows, Riverdale, is you make your bones was a reference to killing somebody.
Oh, so he got his like killer instinct.
Or he was used as a weapon and he maybe didn't get used as a weapon until then.
That moment.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Right. So that just stood out to me because, again, 12-year-old John was not going to understand the reference of getting my bones, but it's like, oh, is that literally like, oh, he got his bones because this is the place that made him start killing people? Because totally. Especially in the movie versions of this, when Wolverine is breaking out of the facility, he's killing the soldiers. In the animated version, we don't see that, but he's fighting and clawing his way out in most other versions of this story.
Just anything in his way, and there's a lot of people
exactly
in that room. Yeah, so they see this door that is still locked shut because the whole place has been uninhabited for God knows how long. And
we actually do know how long.
Oh yeah.
Because we see that in a later scene, we won't ruin the moment of it, but it was 1973.
Yeah.
And we know that this is roughly 92.
Yeah.
So it is literally 19 years later.
Okay, yeah, so 20-ish years later or something.
We got actual math.
And so Wolverine tries clawing through it, and then Beast just hotwires it. And he's like, sorry, that was less dramatic, but, easier.
Right. I agree with Beast doing that.
Yeah. So they go through, and Wolverine picks up a helmet, the Weapon X helmet, but it's gold for some reason.
Yes, and I was curious. I was like, is that like a lighting filter, or did somebody just miscolor it?
Yeah, I think
because immediately it goes into the flashback of him, like, with the same helmet on, going into a facility and like, breaking in, and something that I guarantee in the comic version of this or in movie versions, he would have been offing real people as opposed to training dummies.
Yeah, so speaking of, he goes into a flashback of like basically a boot camp training for the Weapon X program or whatever.
I think it's more the conditioning for him kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but it looks like what I see like boot camp training stuff, because they're like going through dummies and stuff.
Right. And then I also noticed before he gets put down by Dr. Cornelius, he triple taps the body, like, of the dummy.
Oh, I didn't notice.
Yeah, like, like there's the whole thing of like when if you're ever in a horror movie, put 2 bullets in their head. Yeah. He literally shoots 3 more shots into the dummy, which he has already killed. So it's like he's doubly making sure that his target is down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Which also reminded me of, I recently finally watched John Wick for the first time when I was the first time I watched it, and there is the scene where the bad guy does the I think it's a quadruple tap to make sure a certain character is dead.
Isn't that a great series?
I've only watched the first one, so I will be watching the rest of them.
Can't wait to see that, because you don't
suck it, Joe Russo.
Yeah, you don't fuck with a man's dog.
No.
Also, like, nice thing
or Rod's cat.
Right? Yeah. No, I'll murder you. Anyway, the next movie is coming out. Either the villain or one of the villains is going to be played by a gal named Rina Sawayama.
Okay.
Who, totally cool. She's was indie singer, now more mainstream and stuff, but she's Asian British. I don't know how to say it. It's not Asian American, but she's in Britain, but she has Asian heritage.
Okay.
Great singer, but it's really cool to see her like in this role and stuff. So I'm super excited to see any John Wick movie, specifically that. And the funny thing is, once again, all of this because they fucked with his dog.
Yep.
So but yeah, so they continue to explore that training area, and they find the car from the photo that was with Silver Fox,
which is called our Lotus. And I just want to point that part out, because that again gives more of our credence to the theory of the script order having some sort of effect on, or in the airing order having some sort of effect on the script, because the previous episode was Lotus and Steel.
Yeah, and there was no Lotus reference in the actual episode.
Right.
So it was just the
other than if he's calling his relationship with Silver Fox his Lotus, then it makes sense.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of things there. And
they have the flashback where he's actually driving with her. That's where you see he actually carves their name into the front of the cabin, which I guess helps the mail get to the right spot when it's delivered.
So you know who's there.
Yeah. And then to your point that you were referencing earlier, Sabretooth attacks, but this time he's in his more traditional uniform that we've seen Sabretooth in for the majority of the rest of the series.
Yeah. He's like in a superhero costume, for lack of better words. And I guess that was maybe to reinforce that this was like maybe not a what's the thing? It's if it's a like a not like you can't trust the narrator,
unreliable narrator.
Because normally we just say like, oh, it's an animation error, but this specific story, it's like, okay, is this the?
So I totally agree with you. I was going to bring that up if you didn't. Is I do think this is an instance of unreliable narrator.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, it's our hero of the episode.
Yeah, but then the Sabretooth in real life shows up
after Wolverine rips the wheel off the car.
Oh, I forgot.
He literally pulls the steering wheel off the car.
Jesus. Yeah, so Sabretooth shows up in real life, and he's surprised to see Wolverine there. So you just get the vibe that Sabretooth was also lured there somehow.
Right. He accuses Wolverine of luring or dragging him to Canada. Mm-hmm. And then Wolverine shoots it back, and he's like, well, you sent me the photo, didn't you? And Sabretooth is like, what photo?
Yeah. Which makes me wonder what Sabretooth was sent to lure him. Or if someone just called him like, yo, man, come here.
I don't know. The thing, and we'll get into it again a little bit later, but Sabretooth, I feel like is the trauma that is activated with him is extra fucked up. So who knows what it was.
So they fight for a while. It's pretty much standard, like Sabretooth, Wolverine, back and forth.
But then Sabretooth accuses Wolverine of being so scared that he needed to have Xavier mess with his head. So I think to your point, it was probably something that was going on in terms of the memories triggering, that even if the photo wasn't there, that Sabretooth's instincts would bring him back. And that's what the accusation is.
Okay, yeah. So it was just like a memory trigger that he needed to go back.
Right. And because of the association to Xavier, he was probably just like, oh, Wolverine's having him mess with my head.
Gotcha, yeah. That's why he was drawn to that. So maybe it was like less of it was just like a feeling that he needed to go back.
Right.
Because Wolverine did say that earlier, that he also had like a calling to come back besides the picture and stuff.
Yeah, it's drawing me back is what he said earlier. Yeah.
And then there's like this animation error where their dialogue is swapped.
Yes.
It was really weird because it went on for a while.
It was a back and forth between the two. And in previously on X-Men, the making of an animated series, Eric Lewald actually acknowledges that when he was going back to rewatch the entire series leading up to writing the book was when he realized it for the first time.
Oh, no.
And he literally says, like, I'm going to talk to people and, like, see if anybody else ever noticed that and they just didn't tell us. Or did it literally just make it to air and that was the first time anybody noticed it?
Yeah. That's kind of like, I was talking to some like 20-somethings about video games, and I forget how it came up, but someone asked me like, how did they patch video games back in the NES days? I was like, they didn't.
That patching was literally not an option.
Anytime there was a glitch, it just happened. That's how you got half the Mortal Kombat ninjas, because there was a glitch in the arcade machine and it made a different color ninja, and then all of us started a rumor about it, and Ed Boon heard it and he was like, let's make that a character.
They didn't make the character color change until after Ed Boon created it with Ermac, just for clarity.
So Reptile was a glitch, and then they made him like a canon character, and then Ermac, it didn't even exist like physically. Yeah. It was just like a hearsay.
Yeah, that was error macro.
Yeah. In like the admin system in the back end. Yep. But Reptile was definitely one of them. Like he like showed up as green when he wasn't supposed to and stuff. But there was also like game mechanics and things that were like, they just became part of the game.
But yeah.
Anyway, so it might have been this way. Like once it went to air, they were like, well,
once it went to air, you don't correct that.
And
so
who knows what happened to half those cells? You know, I mean, some of them are flying around like Frankenstein's. You know, like
I still need to
stuff.
I need to buy one, but anytime I go to the comic book shows and stuff like that, they're just not scenes I care about.
Yeah.
Like there was one, it was a beautiful shot, but it was Cable, and I really don't give a shit about Cable, so I'm not going to do that. I do love how there was one time I got an animation cell from Loot Crate, and it's like a He-Man cell. Or it's not the He-Man cell, it's the He-Man hand drawing that the cell was drawn on top of.
Oh, okay.
But it's like 1/16 of the page because it's like a super zoom out on He-Man, and I'm like, I can't even frame this because it would just be a giant frame with a tiny He-Man in the middle of it.
Yeah, and some of them probably just got lost, you know, or destroyed, or, you know, you never know. It was like, you know, the music for X-Men, the original sessions don't exist anymore because they recorded over the sessions for the next projects and stuff. So we don't know what happened to the cells and things. But anyway, so that whole lip sync thing was reversed. Then they have the flashback of the Weapon X team escaping Omega Red again that they had from the last episode. Right,
and we finally see it in full where there's some sort of item that they've grabbed. And when they grab that item and they're escaping, Omega Red gets like a full-on reveal out of the tube, essentially. Yeah. And they start running and they're being covered, they being Wolverine and Sabretooth, by Fox and Maverick, and they get separated and Omega Red comes down in between. So Sabretooth closes the panel and basically leaves them to die.
And I think the thing that, like, not to say that would have been great in any situation, but will probably cemented Wolverine saying that Sabretooth killed them was Sabretooth saying that they're dispensable.
Expendable.
Expendable, okay.
Yep.
Expendable is like, it's one thing to be like, this is the call we have to make to survive, but then it's another, like, it's kind of like Cyclops leaving Morph behind in the first episode. It's one thing to make the call, but it's another one to like leave him behind and be like, he's expendable.
Yeah, you kind of rub it in his face that it's like, yeah, we don't really need them. And then cut back to the present, and Silver Fox and Maverick show up and stop the fight.
Oh, I missed my joke there. I was going to be like, Silver Fox and I don't know, some guy shows up.
Good. I'm glad I ruined that for you. I'm actually legitimately happy I ruined that for you.
So I guess like that was our first hint at these memories aren't real.
Right.
Because they're there.
Well, maybe. Because they don't see them die.
Yeah, they don't see him die, but also we know Omega Red, and we're like, probably slim chance that he just went out to lunch with you after that.
I mean, I'm not saying they didn't fight, but if you have this, you know, Weapon X task force team, if there's anybody who could survive, it's probably this group.
Yeah. Or I guess maybe this is another like chip to add to the unreliable narrator scale, you know, like maybe things aren't quite what we thought they were. And so Silver Fox is basically like, cut the shit out. We have to figure out what this program codenamed Talos is, and I summoned you here to figure this out.
Right. She also basically is like, she would have loved to have just been able to kill both of them.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
And that's kind of funny to think because Logan has been pining over this woman for 2 decades now. She wants him dead.
Yeah.
So she's like, let me go show you something.
Well, she was like, oh, you've all been having your nightmares, right? So she's the one, I think, who kind of established that something else was going on. And then she's the one who sent Wolverine the photo with the coordinates on it.
Okay, yeah, so that pretty much establishes that like all 4 of them been having those terrors to draw them back.
Yep.
And so I guess her thing was just the extra tipping.
Yeah.
To get them to come over.
Also, great timing to get them to all arrive roughly at the same time.
Right.
And she believes that what was done to them is specifically codenamed Talos.
Yeah. And so do we. When we're watching it, we're like, oh, this is... And I actually, at the time, I was like, oh, it's kind of like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Project Tahiti. At the time, it seemed similar. We find out nothing like... Well, not quite like that.
No.
And
does also include false memories, though.
Yeah. So that part is kind of true. So then she's like, and then speaking of, so she's like, let me show you something. And she opens up some doors. And it's basically a soundstage. I guess if you're not familiar with like film and TV and stuff, basically like a studio where they make movies and TV shows. And
with
stuff.
just a bunch of different sets that are all like physically close to each other.
Yeah. And they all kind of, even at the wide shot, you can see that they're vaguely reminiscent of things that like Wolverine's been having night terrors about.
Yep. So you see a few things. I was trying to figure out, because it was like Cuba, 198, Quebec, 243. And I was like, are those references to specific issues? They're not.
Okay.
Literally, like I started looking up like Uncanny X-Men and those numbers. And this was before Wolverine would have had issue numbers that high in his own series. So there was just
whatever.
Arbitrary.
I like that Wolverine was like some sort of hoser Hollywood.
Yeah. So each of them goes to a different spot and kind of has their own flashback. Mm-hmm. So you see Dan's diner, where Wolverine kind of has these like Men in Black style guys. Like,
so that's where you got abducted to go into Weapon X? Is that?
But that's the thing is he replies back like, this isn't how it happened.
Okay.
Like he actually calls that out. One reference, don't know if this is true because it's on one of the supporting websites, not on an official thing, but Dan's diner is possibly a reference to Dan Wiesemeyer, who is the artist who I had the pleasure of meeting at Comic-Con, who also did all the artwork on the VHS X-Men boxes.
Yeah, and he's the one that drew the photo of Jean and Cyclops you gave me.
Yeah.
And autographed it.
Then you see the one that's like super, super dark, which is Sabretooth, who, you know, probably that adolescence age of like 13 or so when his mutant power kicked in, and he's in a basement, and it's very much the like religious, I think the first name was like Jebediah Creed or something like that, or Jedediah Creed, and he is pulling out the beating stick.
Yeah, he's dealing with abuse, and you get that like that southern. They don't do a religious thing, but you get the vibe of like that's what's. It's
the like I'm going to beat the demons out of you scenario.
Yeah, and it's one of the few times you kind of feel a little bit of like empathy for Sabretooth because he's just a kid. You know?
Yeah, this is before he's taken the route that he has. I mean, you look at somebody like that and it's like, okay, that's part of what drove them down that route.
Yeah, the first bad day.
Yeah, the first really fucking bad day.
And then Maverick, even they don't care about his story because we don't see it. He just kind of freaks and they're like, all right, move on.
But regardless of it, I don't think you needed to see Maverick's story because he's definitely the odd man out of the episode.
Yeah, I remember him every time.
They couldn't not have him in the episode if they're going to have the Weapon X team. But also, it also could imply his is one of the darker things because he's shouting Creed's name and says for someone to stop him. So it's like, is he watching Creed take somebody out?
Oh, okay. So he was like not softer, but like maybe a kinder people in that group.
Or if he's going to kill a person, he just does a quick kill, whereas Creed is literally shredding somebody.
Enjoying it,
yeah. Like what we've talked about in the previous episode of like shredding people is not a purpose. That's the side of Wolverine he didn't want to become was how was Sabretooth doing this? Because Sabretooth always kind of looks like he's enjoying his missions when he's doing the messed up shit.
And then they find the cabin.
Right.
That we've seen a couple times now. Was it Silver Fox that found the cabin?
Silver Fox is there and she's crying. You see tears coming out. And that's when Wolverine shows up and he asks, like, was the cabin a lie too?
And I guess it's one thing to learn that, like, all your traumatic, violent events.
Right.
I guess this was still violent. But it was one thing to learn that, like, all, like, I don't know, I had to explain, like, the training and all that stuff wasn't real. But to have something, like, good, technically, like
also be fake.
Yeah. Like his relationship with Silver Fox, like, not be real. Like, that was a pretty, after being melted, that was probably, like, a pretty hard hit for him.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that little bit of soaking in the moment gets interrupted by Beast finding the video journal from Dr. Cornelius.
Right. The earliest form of vlog. That plays, and you see it's dated. That's where we know that this happened in October 17th of 1973 is the date that was on it. So that's why we know it was roughly 19, 20 years before this takes place.
Yeah.
Because we know in the next episode that Jubilee hasn't aged more than one full year since joining the team.
Wild.
And they kind of explain what the plan was in that video journal.
Yeah, and I made the comment, like, it showed them kind of getting programmed like Winter Soldier in the current MCU. I know there's differences, but it's just like implanted memories and trigger words and scenarios and stuff.
Yeah, this one is they use specifically trauma conditioning. You know, they're made to attack, remember nothing, which I think goes to your Winter Soldier stuff. Mm-hmm. They have psychoactive chemicals, which are playing a part of it. I think the difference from it is the false memories that are getting implanted by going through these events over and over again, and you know, with actors or whatever. Can you imagine how many actors must have died?
Right.
Like when you're going through this stuff with Sabretooth and the stuff isn't working and he just shreds the actor that is his dad.
Yeah. It's Canadian government, man. Remember? We said that it was like,
the worst villains in the animated universe is the Canadian government.
Yeah, we haven't brought that up in like a dozen episodes. So
wait, I think it's more than that at this point. He also comments that it is best when it's tied to actual events from the conditioning perspective. So like Creed being beaten by his dad and things of that nature. And then Beast kind of, and we're paraphrasing because we can never remember exactly what Beast says, but it's like, essentially the best kind of lie is a lie that's a half truth.
Yeah.
Because you start falling for it.
Yeah. And that's true in real life too. Things just have to be like true enough.
Just be true enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Or acceptable enough in someone's perception or whatever. And then it showed Dr. Cornelius discovers that Wolverine and Sabretooth have like an accelerated healing factor. So he wants to experiment with them. In the demonstration of their healing factor, there was a weird thing where Sabretooth heals into his superhero suit. It was a weird transition. I was like, so is his healing factor create spandex? Because this is not even an unreliable narrator thing. This is like, he was like, you know, nude in a Speedo, and then his suit changes his body shape. When he I don't know. It was an interesting choice of thing. I think it's a Saturday morning cartoon thing, but it was like, okay, he can heal into his suit.
I think you're focused on the wrong part of that animation.
I know, my head. I'm looking at the squirrel on the side of the frame.
Yeah.
And he's like, these might be good candidates for putting adamantium into their
survive bones. The bonding.
Yeah. And so it's like, so we're gonna try this on Wolverine first, and if he survives, then we'll try it with Sabretooth.
Which to me tells me that they considered Sabretooth to be the better weapon because you test on the one that you're not as worried about them dying.
Yeah. And he was smaller too. Wolverine's
less adamantium.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I didn't think about that. I just mean like, they're like, oh yeah, well, he probably won't, but we'll learn something from it. They did learn something from it.
Yeah.
It's not to do it.
It goes badly.
Yeah. And so they show the scene that we know where he gets the adamantium in his bones and stuff and he escapes. But then we also see the other three escape.
Yeah,
that happens.
And Beast says that was the final tape.
Yeah, and Silver Fox says, well, there's one room that we can't get into, and this is what I really wanted to show you. And we see like a door to a big door to a room that has like 4 handprints on it, and she says it's DNA locked. And I think Beast like put his hand up there and it said unidentified.
Yeah, Beast kind of mansplained it to her.
Yeah.
She like already established what it was, and she's like, she wanted to be like, yeah, I fucking know.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, because she's like, I summoned you here. Yeah. Also, who the fuck are you?
No, I like that she had this like laser that she was using to cut the door, and she's like, this is for a full hour, but no luck. And I was like, it actually made a little bit of a dent. If you maybe should have gone for more than 1 hour.
Yeah.
Like maybe your laser ran out.
Yeah, they're in Canada. I don't know.
What does Canada have to do with razors? Lasers, Rod?
Yeah, I don't know. So she figured that it'd be easier to lure Sabretooth and Wolverine over there instead. So obviously the 4 of them, because of their trauma and discovering all this new... Well, so Maverick and Silver Fox already knew about all this, but Wolverine and Sabretooth just learning like, half our lives were a lie. They want to know what happened. Beast is like, hey, something is off here, because if they're trying to hide something from you, why would they put it under a lock that only the 4 of you could unlock?
And then Wolverine says, fuck it, I'm doing it anyway, which I get that.
Yeah, your curiosity will always, override everything. So they do it.
So they go into this room, and then Sabretooth gives the most Sabretooth-ass response ever. That's like borderline blob level response to me. Well, he goes, it's a room with nothing. And it's like, it's a room with computers that have all the files that are teaching you everything.
And crates of whatever.
Yeah.
So, like, there's stuff in there.
Yeah, like, I get that you don't understand how computers work, but they've literally, like, you don't know if there are more VHS in those boxes.
They really punch up the bumpkin
Yeah.
Outside of Sabretooth. He's like, what is these newfangled blinky lights in here?
The one who's probably recently murdered his own son we saw off camera.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So, guys, they're starting to doubt it. Dr. Cornelius pops up with the next part, his part 2 of his vlog. Not happy to see you here, because if you're here, it means all of this failed.
Yeah, the conditioning has failed. And welcome to the failsafe program.
Yeah. And it's like, activate codename Talos. And we found out Talos is a robot.
So, Talos, do you know anything about that name?
No.
So, 2 important things. One, this character was seen in one of the earliest episodes when you were looking at the flashbacks from when Wolverine and Sabretooth. Remember how we were talking about like who the people were? Mm-hmm. Talos was one of those people.
Okay.
Yeah, the only one we're not sure of is, I think one was Valerie Cooper, and we've still not seen Valerie Cooper.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but Talos also was from Greek mythology, from when Zeus created an automaton.
Oh, okay.
So the character itself was named after Greek mythos.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a sentry almost.
Just the fact that it was a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they fight Maverick. I don't know Maverick's power set, but I guess he was told to scan Talos to figure out weaknesses.
Yeah, he doesn't exactly show in the cartoon what his powers are, but he's a skilled fighter and well-equipped, essentially.
Okay. So he's like a tactician or something.
Yeah, let's while you keep talking, I'm going to see what is Maverick's powers.
So Maverick scans Talos and discovers that his power source is like deep within, which is good design for a robot. But Beast says, well, if we can get thermite in there, then it'll destroy the power source. It's funny. I only know what thermite is because of the YouTube channel Modern Rogue, where they played with it to burn stuff. and so I was like, oh yeah, that would work. I know what that is. And so they keep fighting. Sabretooth sees his father in Talos. And I have my notes, goes Ralphie on Talos.
That's fair.
Although, if you don't know what I mean, it's like Ralphie with Scott Farkas in Christmas Story. Except he doesn't win. He gets thrown off. He ultimately loses.
Kinetic absorption and then regenerative healing factor.
Oh. So I guess not as strong as Wolverine and...
I believe not as strong as...
And that's why he didn't get chosen for the thing.
Yeah. Shocking they didn't put him through it first, or they were just like, oh, his healing factor kind of sucks. We don't want him to die automatically. Yeah. Although Rod would have been okay with it.
Well, I wouldn't have known. So after Sabretooth fails to go full Ralphie on Talos, they keep fighting. Wolverine did, in the fight, carve a hole into
his
back. And then gets like a shot. It looks like maybe his ankle or something, where there's like a fuel line.
I think it was like the back behind the knee kind of scenario. Yeah.
So it stalls him enough that Maverick can throw a thermite grenade in there and it blows him up. And it does defeat Talos.
It does. But that's where there's like this moment where you were probably like, is that a power or is that a suit? Where he basically just kind of like gets enveloped in his armor. And then there's a great joke where it was just like, oh yeah, I'll introduce you to my tailor. Because Wolverine even acknowledges that's an upgrade.
Yeah. So it was a split second. I was like, that's power, and it's like, oh, it's not. All right.
Yeah. And for me, like, I didn't remember his voice from this episode because the first time I watched it was so many years ago. But having read him in comics, he has like a little bit of an accent that I can't actually even place where it's from. But that was not the voice I was expecting Maverick to have.
It's like a Canadian impersonating a Canadian.
I don't know. But it was just how stiff he was.
Yeah.
I was just like, is this like, I don't know, a Canadian impersonating a Russian impersonating a Canadian?
Yeah. I can't even remember what it sounded like. I just watched it.
It was just very stilted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Beast opens up the door.
Yeah. They think they've won. So they start leaving. And then Sabretooth gets overconfident, and it looks like he's trying to take the Talos head as like a souvenir.
Well, he literally says, "This is my new ashtray."
Yeah.
Which, holy shit, they said ashtray in a cartoon with for kids?
Oh, 90s.
Yeah. But we were the dare generation, man. Like, they were telling us not to do anything. Now, I don't go vape yourself to death. I don't care.
So as he's holding the Talos head, the head like reanimates because it's a robot.
Yeah,
and
because it doesn't have a heart and it can have alternate power sources. Yeah,
and he's like activate
trauma triggers.
It was like Talos 2 or something like a.
Another unit pops up. So everybody kind of gets a head zap, which knocks them all out, and then a second unit pops up out of the floor.
Beast thinks real fast, so to his credit, he just went bang, bang, bang. He like found a truck,
right,
loaded everybody in, and started getting the hell out of there while he threw another grenade at the second Talos, which looked like it destroyed him at first.
So he grabs, it's not a grenade, he grabs like a full like bandolier off of Maverick, I'd imagine.
Gotcha.
Because pouches, and it was the 90s. And then he was wearing his Lucky Shiar backpack. So he laser blasts it. To your point, it looks like it blows him up. I got the impression it actually did blow him up, and then a third Talos pops up.
That would make so much more sense, because I think I remember seeing like the parts explode. So there's just an endless.
Yeah, it's just, we're just going to keep making the Taloses, essentially.
So Dr. Cornelius is smart enough to have failed the Weapon X program ×4, and also not make the decision to release all the Talos soldier robots at the same time. Just do them one at a time to be courteous. Beast gets away with all them unconscious in the back of the truck.
Yeah, he gets them out, and it's kind of like the narrow escape of the door is about to close, and he floors it, and he gets through as Talos is shooting missiles. And of course, that poor facility, man, regardless of the shit that's going down in there, that thing has had so many things blow up inside of it.
Yeah. Only second to the X-Mansion.
I don't know. X-Mansion hasn't gotten this fucked up, I feel like, more than once.
Yeah. And so they're outside celebrating their victory. I feel like a little too early, because you're not, like, you're too confident that there's not more Talos just coming out of the rubble. But
that have, like, how do you know there aren't 15 of them? And if they're just underground, like, that doesn't mean that they just can't pop up in a few minutes.
Yeah. They have their moment where, like, cool, we're done. And then they start leaving. Yeah,
Beast runs over to prep the jet, and Wolverine kind of had like a bro moment where it was just like, it was good to see you.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, at least Maverick doesn't blame Logan for what happened. Whereas we got the impression earlier from Silver Fox that she absolutely blames Wolverine, regardless of what Sabretooth did.
Yeah, which is interesting, because he's the only reason they got out of there. Otherwise, they just would have been like killing machines and living alive for the rest of their existence. But speaking of, Wolverine tries to appeal to Silver Fox. And it's like,
as you see Sabretooth kind of get off the truck at the same time.
See, I didn't notice that. Okay,
yeah,
that makes sense.
They literally, like, at the same time, like, got off the back, but the camera stayed focused on Silver Fox and Wolverine.
So Wolverine's like, something between us had to be real. And that's not just my feeling. That's also, like, the carving in the door wasn't on the set.
Right.
So it happened somewhere. And she was like, even if that was the case, that ship has sailed. Like, we're different people now. Like, it
was another life.
And so she fucks off in a jet.
Now, do you know anything about her as a character?
No, I literally only knew her from the show.
Does the color scheme of her outfit give you any hints?
I forget, it was like a greenish.
Green and yellow. Because I'm assuming you didn't see the logo on the front of her ship.
No, I didn't.
It was a Hydra logo.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Okay, so she's just gone off the deep end.
Yeah.
Then, okay.
Yep. Which does align with what would happen in the comics, where she actually at one point was a leader within Hydra.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she just went like full evil after the Weapon X thing. And so so she leaves, and then everyone else is already gone. Beast comes back, he's like, where the fuck everybody go?
Specifically, where did Sabretooth go?
Yeah. Which, fair concern, because he's the one that can do the most damage. And Wolverine is just like, everything was a lie. Like, what's up with that and stuff? And then Beast is like, or he's like, what do I do with that now that I know that my history is a lie? And Beast is like, well, the memories you've made with us and you're making now are real, which is a good point.
But the only thing that he does also say for that is, when it's like, where did Sabretooth go? And it's like, he had enough for one day. He did save him during that battle. And that was like,
he saved me for some reason.
Yeah, it's like, regardless of the why, it's like, we're not going to follow him because of that. Which we have seen them do in the past somewhat reasonably, with like the Juggernaut when he got pulled out of his coma and such, where it was like, I could fight, but I don't need to. I think they get that same vibe with Sabretooth here.
Yeah. Which will cause them problems later, probably.
Right.
Sure.
So as they're getting ready to leave, we see the final shot, which is the names carved. Instead of being in the cabin, it's in the tree, meaning that there was something that had happened between them that was legitimate.
Kind of going back to Beast's quote, like, it was half true.
Right.
So, like, their romance was probably true. It was just the location was like a little off.
Yep. So some interesting stuff about this episode. It was, again, revisiting, origins with Wolverine, but it actually makes you question the rivalry between Sabretooth and Wolverine, because we see everybody is in the facility and escaping at the same time. So if Wolverine's source of, he offed some buddies of mine, he didn't actually off them.
And they survived.
or everyone was thought to have killed, and that's why I said with Omega Red, maybe he didn't kill them. They just didn't know that they had made it back, and before that could be revealed and they had wiped the memory of that mission, that was the last thing they remember, even though all 4 members did survive.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so it might have been a real mission.
Right. So he may have still left them, but he didn't actually kill them, which is why Wolverine hates him so much. Yeah. Interestingly enough, the only time Weapon X is mentioned in the episode is the title itself.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Like, we know it's the Weapon X program, but it is never actually said anywhere in the episode.
Gotcha. Kind of like the Lotus thing in the last episode. I'm putting it all together now in real time.
Right. Yeah, the hamster is running through that wheel right now. And then the final reference of anything is this is loosely based off of Wolverine numbers 48 through 50, and then 61 through 64, which were published between 1992 and 1993.
I like this episode. The 8.0 star rating makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense on this one.
Yeah, it's a cool episode. Wrong order, but still liked it.
Yeah, there's something about Wolverine's origin that always hits harder. Like, yeah, we've seen, you expand further on Rogue and stuff like that, but I feel like there's only so many times you can see Rogue's origin before it's like, okay, shitty abusive father, adopted parents training her to go into, the mutant liberation and stuff like that. But I don't need to see it multiple times. Because of Wolverine's age, you get so many layers that keep getting added to it. And eventually, like in the comics, they went a little wild with it. But like, this is a damn good origin.
Also, because of his amnesia, you kind of get like a memento storytelling from it. So we've gotten this piece together. I don't think there's any single episode that tells the whole story. You just piece it together over the course of all the seasons.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. It makes it kind of confusing, but it's pretty cool.
But there was a book I read, almost 20 years ago, that was called Everything That's Bad Is Good for You. And it talks about how our generation with comic book storytelling and shows like this, which were not just you have an episode that is purely standalone, like, the old school, like Honeymooners and those kinds of shows. Like, we actually had to remember storylines week to month to year, whereas some of those classic shows were all one and dones.
Yeah, this was we talked about it in the earlier episodes and stuff. Like, this was one of the first, besides Batman the Animated Series, like first serialized things for kids.
But I would actually even say that there was more serialization to this story than to Batman, because most of the serialized stuff within Batman was about the villains. Yeah. Like, you would learn a little more about Mr. Freeze in a few episodes. You would learn a little bit more about Harley, or not really Joker. Joker never really, they didn't touch on his origin in that original series. But you didn't get much episode to episode ongoing story for Bruce himself.
Yeah. There wasn't like a Phoenix saga for the Batman series, besides maybe like the movies and stuff. But
those also were the less iconic stories too. Don't get me wrong, Mask of the Phantasm is great, but I think if you ask the average Batman fan, what are the stories? And Mask of the Phantasm is not even in the top 10. Yeah,
the Batman animated series was more like it was like a little bit of the villain of the week.
Yeah,
but like you said, it still followed like a chronological timeline. It wasn't like The Simpsons, where they're forever in the mid 90s,
but with evolving technology.
Right, that's great.
Yep.
Well, was it? I think that someone correct me if I'm wrong. If you watch The Simpsons, I think I still watch the episodes.
I only watch the Halloween ones now.
So there was an episode, and I think someone actually tells Homer that he was in a coma from that episode that everybody talked about, and it was made as a joke, but it was a little bit satisfying because they were like, "It's like, Homer, you've been in a coma ever since you opened that can."
Oh, when he does the April Fool's episode?
Like
it's an early episode in one of the first few seasons where Bart April Fool's pranks him by taking a can of Duff and he puts it in a paint mixer along with a million other things. So it's like literally ready to pop before Homer even touches it.
Yeah, but there's this internet theory last decade or so that Homer actually went into coma then, and everything we've seen since
has just been his head.
Yeah, and that's why nobody ages and stuff, and that's
why that actually makes a lot of sense from the Springfield being unidentifiable as a real Springfield, because Homer would be so bad at geography and like,
So-
okay, I actually accept that. I talk shit about a lot of theories like the Genosha theory. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's probably still not actual canon, but they referenced it in one of the more recent episodes. Like, oh, nice little touch. Like you put it in there. This could be a possibility in the actual show. But anyway, thanks for joining us. If you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them in the comments for either the YouTube upload or official Instagram post about this episode. If you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on the podcast app you're choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and CastBox, whatever the fuck that is.
And there is absolutely no way that the Eternal is going to be the foundation of the island of Genosha. No fucking way. I will fight the Kevin robot.